What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Tavern Talks 2.0. I am joined this week by Mr. Iron and my buddy Alex. How you guys doing today?
Fantastic.
Good, as always.
All right, well, we have a heck of an episode today. We've been talking about this for darn near a month now, and very exciting to get into a topic that I think is near and dear to all of our hearts. We're going to be talking about Star Wars today.
Heck yeah.
Specifically, we're going to talk about the things we absolutely love about the originals and the things that we do not love that Disney has been pumping out as of the last, 10 years. But
Kathleen Kennedy.
Okay, we're jumping right into that. But before we do that, make sure you guys like the video, you subscribe to Velvet Games, and you ring that bell so you're notified when we release new content. I've been trying to get these out every Friday, and save for the first Friday of the new year, we've actually been doing that, and it's been exciting. These guys have actually been featured on past videos, exclusively these two, since the beginning of this year. It's been an absolute pleasure to record with you guys. You guys are a lot of fun to chat with and really banter up. With all that aside, I think we can jump right into it. I have no segue, straight into the topic here because I am so excited to talk about this. I talked a little bit with you, Iron, about the point that I went to Star Wars Celebration and everything. That was my first convention. And that wasn't even the beginning. I think my love for Star Wars probably started, I was maybe 7. And I remember finding, we had a TV in our bonus room in our house with a VCR on it. And I remember going through a cabinet and finding the original trilogy on VHS.
Oh, perfect.
And this is before any of the CGI edits and whatnot. This was straight to home release. I think my dad bought them back in I don't know, 94 or something, it's whenever they released it. And it was, I immediately fell in love with it,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I cannot pinpoint my exact first Star Wars memory exclusively because episode 1 or The Phantom Menace came out when I was still an actual toddler, but my parents were big Star Wars fans, so I basically grew up with the new movies coming out. I do distinctly remember seeing episode 2 Attack of the Clones as a kid, and having a lot of the Star Wars video games, and of course eventually watching them as a kid, the original trilogy. But one thing that I do distinctly remember is there used to be these Star Wars cross-section books. My dad's he loves aircraft and stuff like that, so it's just kind of reasonable they got it. And I remember as a kid, rather than going through stories, storybooks with my mom, I would pull that off the shelf and try to read that with her, going through the various cross sections. Which now as an adult, I'm that's an unusual parent-child activity, but nonetheless, I loved the ships, I loved the designs, and looking at my actual interests now, that explains a lot. But nonetheless,
you're reading the thing and it's what is this part here? The static non-chronofibrillator?
Yeah, exactly. I grew up knowing more about repulsor lifts than I did about actual real aircraft.
Exactly.
But that said, I just kind of grew up with a lot of the content out there. I remember my parents took me out of school when episode 3 came out. It was the premiere day, and they came and checked me out of elementary school. They were like, he's got an appointment. And
I just straight up didn't go to school that day. My uncle, he's like, hey, you wanna get some Doritos that turn your tongue purple and go to the movies? I'm like, bad. So we ended up going to the gas station, grabbing those Doritos. Also, that's what I learned: take your own snacks and hide them.
Oh yes.
But we went there and just good times.
Oh, phenomenal. But yeah, I grew up inundated with that kind of stuff. The video games, the comic. I'm sure we'll get into it.
Oh yeah. And it's funny you mentioned episode 3 because I'm a 97 baby, so I was very, very small when Phantom Menace came out, I do not remember going to see episode 2, but I very distinctly remember seeing episode 3 in theaters. And I think it was probably around that time. Yeah, I guess that would have been about, let's see, it was 2000, was it 2005 or 2004?
I believe it was 05.
2005. So I would have been 8. So yeah, that's around the time frame I was really deeply into Star Wars. And I remember going to see this in theaters and just blown away with it. You know, we'll talk about the prequels in a few, but honestly, that movie, like when you said, you know, going out of school to go see this movie, I distinctly remember like the details behind it. And, you know, of course, this was 20 years ago. That's crazy that it's that long ago.
Yeah.
But, you know, 20 years ago, and I still have this, like, it's like a core memory just burned into my mind.
Oh, yeah. That movie was incredible, especially to younger me. I mean, the opening with the space battle.
Oh my gosh.
There's probably a reason I love spaceships this much, you know?
How about you, Alex? What's your introduction look like?
Yeah, what's your Star Wars story, my friend?
All right. So it was a dark and stormy night.
Oh boy.
A good story to start that way.
It was no, I was actually I think I was 3. I think we went opening week or something like that because my family's big into all things nerdy. If this tells me anything, my mom got me into anime, my uncle got me into video games, and both of them are still nerds today. So
Perfect.
there's that. Yeah. So I think I was kind of a quiet kid, like when baby. So it was okay for them to take me to the movie theaters. And I think I gained consciousness around the same time as like Princess Amidala gives baby Annie the look. And I think something about that scene felt weird to me because Annie's a baby and I'm a baby and she's not a baby. What is happening?
Yeah.
So like I was a little weirded out, and it was kind of weird. And that night I remember we left the movie theater and I had a curled up premiere poster. So it's the poster where it's the one where you have like Anakin as a kid in the I'm pretty sure it has his shadow in the background. So where Anakin's kind of looking at the camera, and then there's the shadow of him in the background where it's Vader. Yeah, it's such a cool poster. But we ended up going back, and I ended up watching Empire Strikes Back like that same night. And with my newfound like mind powers, I realized I put 2 and 2 together. I'm like,
well, that's him.
Oh, that's the same kid.
I was just about to say that. I was gonna be when did you guys find out, you know, as a kid, that Anakin and Vader are the same person?
Dude, it was that night. It was that night because I remember putting up the poster and the movie was playing on my tiny little TV, and I'm posting it, and I look over and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because like as a kid, I always thought that it was like Darth Vader standing over Anakin, like as if Anakin's like looking at Darth Vader, and then I realized I saw the little feeties and the shadow was going from Anakin to the wall, and I'm like,
wait a minute.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I was like, there's no way.
No, honestly, like it's moments like that I think really define, you know, how you feel about Star Wars in general, or just anything in general, but you know, like specifically what can help solidify a love for it, because it really gets you in that, holy crap, I didn't realize that could be a thing.
Well, okay, well, let's not get too hasty. I actually fell back in love with Star Wars, or just fell in love with Star Wars in the first place by hating it.
Oh,
go on.
Okay.
Yeah, I hated Star Wars growing up. I hated it. Yes, but hear me out.
Okay.
The only reason why I hated it was because baby me was more of a hipster than I am today. And honestly, Space Wizard Hamlet was still kind of cool.
Space
But-
Wizard Hamlet.
He's not wrong.
Yes, you
not wrong.
heard me. It's Space Wizard Hamlet, right? But when episode 3 came out, it was like a whole different game because
Felt like an opera.
yes, yeah, but it's because it turned into Space Caesar, and I'm like, I like Julius Caesar. Let's go Shakespeare. We love it.
That's fair.
At two, Brutus.
Exactly. Well, because you can still look at the parallels to this very day with Anakin wearing the dark clothing and kind of betraying Obi-Wan, and then Obi-Wan over here wearing, the most purest fit you could ever possibly have 3 movies in a row. So
the guy,
Ides of March, you must.
the guy who gave like a figure of Obi-Wan from the prequels to his grandmother and said, "This is like I told her this was Jesus."
Oh no!
wait, was it Obi-Wan? I thought it was Qui-Gon.
No,
No,
it was Obi-Wan.
It was Obi-Wan.
I've seen the meme.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so good.
Qui-Gon is Space Jesus, though. we like Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon's great.
Everything would have gone a lot better if Qui-Gon had lived.
Oh,
Everything would have
man.
been great if Yoda would just shut up.
Star Wars would have a lot less CGI if they had somehow retained Liam Neeson.
I really, really hate Yoda. I hate Yoda.
Wow.
Really?
That's
Yeah.
some strong words. That's fighting
Everything's
words.
his fault. Literally everything is his fault.
Everyone in the comments, go beat up Alex.
No, dead serious. Because okay. Literally the entire reason as to why Anakin turned to the dark side is because of Yoda.
Well, hold on. Let me try and empathize with your point before I try to counter it. Okay, I see where you're coming from. I mean, as the master of the council, technically, like the council head, he does get final say on most policy, depending on which comic you're reading. That gets complicated.
Well, it's not even just that. It's the whole Master of Light thing, or the whole Avatar Light thing too.
Right, and ultimately he has been around the longest, meaning that he should have seen that coming. So I see where you're coming from. However, I feel
Also
that
the
the
Duke
character... Yeah, but I feel that the character who better represents the arrogance and fall of the Jedi
Windu.
is actually Mace Windu. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, and
I
here's
understand.
what I mean.
I saw this coming.
But, well, because here's the deal, right? Because Yoda, to me, narratively, represents the wisdom of the old Jedi Order and therefore some of its better vestiges. However, he is overshadowed by a lot of the newer, younger council members who more represent the new Jedi, and especially Windu, who's more of this kind of conservative, almost foolhardy faction within the Jedi. And he's the most blatant of, like, Jedi arrogance. For instance, listen, I love Lucas's stories. I love his world. His writing is blunt at times. But scenes like this do illustrate, like, just his blatant, I sense a plot to destroy the Jedi. First off, a masterclass in writing, guys.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
second off, the fact that he was able to articulate, like, okay, we know that something's coming after us, but was still so arrogant as to believe, well, it's not like anything could actually dislodge us, but I will seek it out. And then just the way he treats Anakin, the way he does, because Yoda always at least listened to Anakin. Yes, he did say things that Anakin didn't want to hear, and especially the detachment stuff was old wisdom. And I'll give you that one. That didn't help Anakin on the journey. Anakin felt like he couldn't come to Yoda because of things like that. But nonetheless, it was Windu who was more antagonistic, like, nope, he shouldn't be here. I don't trust him. I don't like that this kid has this much power. He's the one who said that they were denied master. Yes, it was a council decision, but nonetheless, he's the one who said it, which narratively to me says that he's more the representation of that. I'm not saying it's Windu's fault, but he's kind of the voice of the decline of the Jedi. And I think he played that role really well.
It depends, because it also depends on if we're just exclusively talking about the movies. Because if we're exclusively talking about the movies, then yes. But
We're going deeper.
oh no, yeah, absolutely. Because like here's the issue for those who are kind of like unaware, Windu is the epitome of why I like Star Wars in certain contexts, right? So for those who don't know, Mace Windu is kind of like the arbiter of when it's okay. Mace Windu is the line of which the dark and the light kind of meet, because Mace is a almost exclusively dark side force user, but he's a Jedi, and he
Oh, sorry.
So the thing about Mace is that he has was it Force Shatter, right? Where he gets these little glimpses of foresight into the future. He knows exactly what Anakin is, and it's not that he dislikes Anakin. It's I like to kind of like think a little bit more like Mace's relationship with Anakin is more kind of like a Severus Snape Harry Potter kind of vibe.
Oh, okay.
And the problem with what was going on is Mace's attitude towards Anakin was at least in part clouded by Yoda's love for Anakin, because Mace wanted to be the one to train Anakin himself, but Yoda said, "Nah, fam, we're gonna give him to Obi-Wan," because both of them knew Qui-Gon. And Mace Windu is like the captain of tough love.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you there's one of my favorite stories is actually about why Mace's lightsaber is purple.
Well, I know why his lightsaber is purple.
Other than Samuel L. Jackson just saying make it purple, right?
No, I know both of these, and it's great.
Yeah. But the comic, the in lore, in canon reason, which I'm not sure if it's canon anymore, because Legends and Kennedy go hand in hand. Like
it's the good canon.
Yeah. So essentially, he's like, "Hey, I want to get this specific type of crystal," and Yoda and the rest of the Jedi are like, "That's not real," and Yoda's like, "Go for it, I guess. I mean, here, go yonder. You have my permission, but just know, if you die, you die." All right? And Mace is like, "I bet." And so he goes essentially on this long journey on this foreign planet, meets these alien creatures, and long story short, ends up with it. Discovers the fact that he's a dark side force user at the same time, comes back an absolute goat, right? And then suddenly he's just the most amazing, most powerful or one of the more powerful force users there are. And the cool thing about Mace is that his entire force style is just kung fu. Yeah, it's just dark side martial arts. He is like the epitome of if you walk towards me, I'm gonna beat your ass. It's the greatest thing that has ever happened.
I was going to say, I thought you were going to mention that he, despite being a Jedi and following the Jedi code, uses a lot of actual Sith techniques in both his martial arts and Force use. Like, he's not a gray Jedi, but he studied the dark side and took the lessons of it and then applied the morality of the Jedi code to their use. Which in universe is one of the symbolic reasons. I actually forgot that he had that whole quest to get his unique crystal. You got me there. That's awesome. But I remember that the purple was eventually explained as like, oh, well, you see, unlike the typical, green for wisdom, blue for, swordsmanship, knowledge, that kind of stuff, the purple was more of this blend because it's closer to red on the spectrum to show that he was blending dark side in. Of course, the behind the scenes is just as hilarious because this recording of it they managed to capture that beloved moment while they were filming the behind the scenes of episode 2.
He's just like, nah, make it purple. I want a purple lightsaber.
He's like,
no, I want a grape flavor. Let's go.
Lucas is right. Well, there's, the good guys have green and blue, and, the bad guys got red. And he's like, yeah, but I can have purple, right? And Lucas looks nervous and is like, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, straight up. It's like, let's be like, here, write something neat, lose Samuel L. Jackson.
I absolutely love, though, there is another part of that behind the scenes that is absolutely wonderful about Windu, and it's talking about their experiences with the blue screen and with the green screen. And specifically, like, almost every actor, like, I think Haydenson was like, it's a challenge when you don't have something there. And then a couple actors were like, oh, it's difficult. There's no references or anything. And then Samuel L. Jackson is the only actor to go, I was having a blast. I could just swing myself like, and then they animate around it. I get paid to play pretend. This is amazing. Like, he was the only one who was excited.
Well, because like I'm pretty sure he was the only one that just did not give a damn about their direction, literally at all. Like he's like, no, I get it. I totally respect your ability to do whatever it is that you're doing, but I'm gonna go over here, do my own thing, bite me. There's nothing they can do about it. Like it's Samuel L. Jackson. What are you gonna do? Say no?
They animated around him, and he was just so giddy and excited about it. I absolutely love it. I love to see an actor who is that interested in the role.
100%, 100%. Well, with that, before we get too into the prequels and everything, because I think that's a good transition. Let's talk about it. Our absolute of the. Okay, so first before I say this, can we agree that the original saga, the original 3 movies, the trilogy, is the best of the sets?
Yes, they laid the groundwork, and as much as I love the prequels from a, nostalgia standpoint, the original trilogy laid it down, and frankly, looking back, the practical effects are amazing, the story is good, it's solid, there are entire actual, scholarly essays written on it.
All right, so as the contrarian in the room,
okay,
it's good. It's good. I'm a little bit more partial to the prequel trilogy just because I feel the same way but in the exact opposite direction. I feel like the OT is kind of the nostalgia fodder, and I feel like the prequel trilogy I think is a little bit more direct with the storytelling. Don't get me wrong. So the cinematography and how amazing the original trilogy is can be talked about for ages. But I don't think good camera work is a good substitute for a cohesive and understandable story for people who aren't that nerdy.
I will say that the prequels do beat the original trilogy in terms of consistent story arc between films. But in my personal opinion, as much as 1 and 2 did have that amazing build-up, the only movie that I could maybe say did beat any of the original trilogy was probably 3, Revenge of the Sith, just because of how cinematic and operatic it was. That's just my opinion. I see where you're coming from, though, and I don't disrespect that.
I was about to say the exact same thing, right? Like, from a cinematic point of view, I don't think anyone can argue that the prequel absolutely blows out of the water the original trilogy. But you also have to look at, especially like episode 4, A New Hope. That one was basically, I mean, by today's standards, it's a budget film. I know it had a little bit of backing, but it wasn't the, the hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars that these people dump into movies that we had back then. So they were working with, a really tight budget. A lot of the stuff was improvised, or they were developing new techniques. Then that mixed with George Lucas's extreme pickiness and the stylings of the late 70s of just film at the time. Obviously it's not going to stand up to something that was made in 2005. But with that said, yeah, I still stand on it. So, Alex, go ahead. I sorry I cut you off there.
Well, I guess a good way to kind of compare it for some people for something a little bit more recent would be, say, like Lord of the Rings versus The Hobbit, right? I feel like Lord of the Rings, objectively speaking, is kind of better in terms of the story and the lore and this and that. And don't get me wrong, it's good, but I feel like for the average uninitiated viewer, someone who's not already into it, I feel like The Hobbit's better, right? Because it's more fun. It's not as strict. It's not as stringent. And it has a little bit of room to actually explore and be fun and creative, right? And I know to people who wanted something a little bit more serious out of Star Wars, obviously that's not exactly the greatest in terms of how the prequel trilogy is, Jar Jar. But
gosh, don't even get me started on that.
But the problem here, and this is why I think this is crucial and important, is because back in the 80s, because Transformers had the exact same problem, right? And I'm a major Gen 1 Transformers fan.
Oh, yes.
It's the problem is, how do you market it to people who have no idea what's going on screen? And the issue is, what makes Star Wars so good and compelling and why it's still such a good thing today is because it captured the hearts and minds of children. And the difference is with the new trilogy, I'm sorry, not with the new trilogy, with the
I was about to say, hold up there, that's a whole nother ballpark.
I'm not touching those yet.
Go for it.
Okay.
We're not there yet.
With the OT, the reason why it was so successful with children is because they didn't have anything else. Sci-fi was at a very, 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 very rare like premium at the time because everything sci-fi had robots in it. Like, you know, Transformers, for example, which even then Transformers wasn't even a thing yet, you know, so like everything sci-fi at the time was kind of you know, there wasn't that much versus, let's say, you know, early 2000s with the the prequel trilogy. Sci-fi was already a thing, Star Wars was already a thing, yeah, but for it to be such a big deal with children again, to be able to get that wave again and capture that exact same thing again, it requires something bigger than just nostalgia.
You're saying that it didn't have the same, like, it had more competition and yet it still stood out. I can respect that.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
I can agree with that.
I like, don't get me wrong, OT objectively better, but in what aspect is it objectively better? Because from a writing standpoint, yes, objectively better, right? But from a storytelling standpoint, writing and storytelling are way different, right? And I feel like storytelling it's kind of the difference between lore / world building and actually what am I looking at, right? Because everyone knows, like, Tolkien is like the GOAT of world building. He created fantasy for the most part, right? If you would apply that exact same thing, yes, you know, the OT does a pretty good job at world building, but does it do a good job at storytelling? And for the fact that there was this massive framework in which the OT created to set up the prequel trilogy did almost nothing with that. Like, if you really think about it, the only things that they kept was that Obi-Wan knew Anakin, and that Anakin becomes Darth Vader, and the Emperor is kind of pulling the strings there.
Well, the one thing I think about that, because, you know, like you mentioned, from a storytelling perspective, things were left a little vague in the original trilogy, and I think it's hard to tell if that was intentional or not. I think maybe it wasn't. It's possible it was, because maybe Lucas was thinking, okay, we want people to kind of draw their own conclusions and, you know, give it that mystique in their head. And if that's the case, I respect it. You know, there's a lot of other sci-fi that does that, and is kind of a pioneer of that at the time, because, like you mentioned, there wasn't a lot of sci-fi at the time going back into the 70s. The only other one that I can, two, I guess, that you can consider as mainstream would have been Star Trek and Doctor Who.
Yep.
So if you look at what Star Wars did, I feel like it kind of gave space sci-fi, and I mean, like you mentioned, it's literally, you know, Hamlet with wizards, space wizards. The way that they tackled that, it seems like such a ridiculous premise, but there was something just so magical about it, and maybe it was the way that he put that love and care into it. But I'm sidetracking. Basically, what I was going to get to here is it was left vague enough that people could fill in their own points. And what they did with that is, in the trilogy, they said, okay, we've got a bunch of loose ends to tie up. We can go and tackle these in any way we want to. And then they did that. And honestly, I don't even think we needed episode 7, 8, and 9, right? Like, we could have left it with just...
No, absolutely not.
We could have just gone episode 1 through 6 and been like, dude, that's a complete saga, doesn't need anything else.
Don't even get me started on The Force Awakens, dude. Oh, don't even get me started.
Yeah, before we dive into that at all, I just want to kind of tie that up with a bow, because the original trilogy can serve, and did serve, as Luke's hero's journey.
Yep.
And it had a good beginning, middle, and end. And the context of the prequels enhances that by suddenly making the overarching story, and of course the story of the first three itself, into a kind of inverse of that, a foil of that, with Darth Vader's anti-hero's journey as you see his fall. And of course, that in and of itself, because of what happens at the very end of
with the redemption arc,
trilogy, yes, that ends up making the overall narrative richer. See, that's just it. If you're going to make a prequel, it should enrich and enhance the viewing of the original. For instance, Better Call Saul with Breaking Bad, or something like that. And in this case, by making Anakin your main character in the original trilogy, and then showing his hero's journey, or the hero's journey of his son, and his ultimate conclusion as a character, it has both. So you can watch the original trilogy in a vacuum, and you can watch the prequels theoretically in a vacuum, but it just enhances the later movies narratively, and I love that.
Absolutely.
I will say just another credit to the prequel trilogy here, just to kind of like give you guys just a little bit.
I love the prequel trilogy. I really do. I just, if I had to
without
pick,
Yeah, no, I get it. But without the prequel trilogies, we don't have the Clone Wars.
Oh man,
That's true.
Okay, I'm gonna slow you down and stop it right there because we're gonna get into that in just a few minutes. Because
about to start.
That is a whole nother thing because I can see where this is going. So before we move on, question of the original the original trilogy, which of the movies is the best? Like not necessarily objectively, but your favorite.
Okay, I was going to ask to clarify, because if we're talking like overall production quality, writing, and all of that, it's probably exactly what you expect. The Empire Strikes Back, but personally, my personal favorite, just for sheer like, oh, this gets me like so excited every time. It's probably actually A New Hope, just because I get to see the beginning of that arc, and Lucas did not expect to get a sequel. He planned for it, but he didn't expect it, so it feels like it can be watched in a vacuum like a lot of 70s movies. And of course, the scenes of him like going from just bottom of the rung farm boy all the way to like ace pilot, again with my interest in ships and vehicles. It's just, I really, really, really like that arc. I cannot deny that Empire Strikes Back is definitely the masterfully better film, and there's definitely scenes in it that I do like more. But if we're talking like what's my personal favorite, sheer just 100% subjectivity, it's got to be A New Hope for me.
Okay.
Mine's gonna be Empire Strikes Back. I'm sorry. Like,
no, you are 100% justified.
Yeah, because here's my thing. Right? It's, for me, and you guys are gonna hate me. For me, it's the only interesting of the three.
Ooh, that's a take.
Interesting. Justify.
Yeah. Because so A New Hope, right? On the first watch through, great. Yeah. On a second watch through, I cannot unsee Leia's gun face. I cannot unsee so many of the mistakes that they made. Man. Like, don't get me wrong. So Star Wars' entire thing, and this is why I like to give credit for Star Wars, and where my defense of the prequel trilogy kind of stems from is Star Wars is meant to be goofy. When they originally made it, it wasn't meant to be goofy. There's my disconnect. Its identity is something that is both simultaneously serious but goofy as hell, right? You don't get that necessarily. At least you don't get that aspect with the with the OT, with the exception of like C-3PO. You know,
he's a carryover from the original.
Exactly. So it's like
wait. Hold up. Did you just say there's nothing goofy about the prequels? Are you forgetting a certain Sith Lord?
No. I'm saying the OT wasn't meant to be goofy.
Yeah.
The OT wasn't meant to be goofy,
that's
it
fair.
ended up being goofy. Whereas the prequel trilogy really, really, really was kind of goofy in kind of all the best ways and kind of cringe in some others. Granted, Darth Jar Jar, we all know that was all an act, but when it comes to
that was going to be a question later.
But when it comes to the OT, it wasn't meant to be goofy, but kind of ended up being that. You know. Anyway, so to really captivate my interest, you have to have the perfect mesh of amazing world building and also have a really, really good story to tell. And I feel like A New Hope has a good story to tell, but the world building was just new. It wasn't good. It was just new. And
it was,
kind of, as we all know, something novel doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be objectively good for it to be fun and subjectively good. So I'll give it the good. It's a good novelty when it first came out, but for something to be good, it has to be able to stand up throughout the times. And I feel like A New Hope does a really, really bad job at selling itself, right? Whereas Return of the Jedi does a really good job at selling itself. And I feel like The Empire Strikes Back doesn't need to sell itself because we all know what's about to go down. Right? Yeah. Whether it's your first time watching it or whether or not you've watched it 1,000 times, we all know what's about to go down. And to this day, it has some of the most iconic scenes you could ever have. Right? A New Hope is good, and it does have iconic scenes. Granted, all Star Wars, anything has iconic scenes, but there's something magical, as Justin said, about The Empire Strikes Back that is just seeing the reflection of Luke and Vader. At the same time, seeing the two of them for the first real time, being in the same shot, you cannot get better of connecting and bridging stories that a story that doesn't even exist yet, mind you, right? Of bridging those two things together. That is when the interest on who Vader really is really captures an audience member for the first time, because everyone just thinks, okay, cool, big scary guy, red lightsaber, ooh, like we just think he's a bad guy. We don't think anything of it, right? But it's when we really sit down and grapple with the concept of Vader being Luke's dad that we're like, what is happening?
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It really, really, really gets you. It really, really drives you, right? To see them both on the same screen and knowing that in some way, shape, or form, especially considering what Luke was wearing at the time, seeing how Luke could potentially turn into Vader really, really makes the audience member worried for Luke, worried about what's going to happen, and also asking the question for the first time, how did we get here in the first place? How did Vader get here? Because if he's Luke's dad, and Ben really loved Anakin, right? Granted, we just knew that Ben and Vader were close at some point.
Yeah. How
did we get to this point? Who is it that Yoda's talking about? Who is it? There's so many things that are happening in Empire Strikes Back, so many questions that are yet to be answered for both, again, the first time viewer and also for the first time, even the first time cinema goer back in the day. There's so much to chew on as an audience member that you don't really get from A New Hope, but you do kind of get with Return of the Jedi, and I feel like The Empire Strikes Back really delivers where the other two kind of fall a little flat in some and kind of excel in others. I feel like The Empire Strikes Back just doesn't fall flat in any category. You know what I mean? So for me, it hits all the right spots. It really gauges my interest. It makes me want to continue the series. It keeps me involved, and I feel like the other two don't.
I could see that, and I'm very much of I'm kind of in between, right? Because I see both the appeal on both of them. I think Return of the Jedi is still a good movie. It does not stand up to the other two, mainly for two purposes. One, A New Hope was the original Star Wars, so seeing like Alex, like you'd mentioned, all the kind of like little mistakes and stuff that were in there is actually a little bit charming. Because you recognize that, again, they were working with the best that they had. One of my favorites is when the stormtrooper bumps his head on the door that didn't open all the way, and then they later added in a sound effect.
Yes,
that is one of my favorites in there.
It's great. I was going to mention they did that. There's also a voice line they added because the door started closing. It was open the blast door, close the blast. They added that. They ADR'd that in. I'm sorry, it was the opposite. They told them to close it. Because originally that was just a tension building scene, but they added that as a little bit of situational comedy.
Yeah, right. It's I really enjoy a lot of the storytelling that you get if you watch like some of the commentary stuff, because it adds. You know what I mean? A lot of the times, like commentary will kind of take away from the magic of it. Whereas a lot of Star Wars commentary, like videos and documentaries and stuff like that, if you actually like look into it, it really adds to it because it's just so goofy. And I feel like that's what Star Wars really is at its core. It's a good story, but it's magical and goofy and it's happy because it makes you feel like no matter how serious things get, the ultimate break in tension, but also the thing that supports it in the first place is the fact that we all know this has a happy ending.
Right. But yeah, looking at it, I see all the nostalgia of A New Hope, all of the cinematic masterclass that you can take from The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, it really sort of set the standard for a good sequel. And ironically, this, the second movie being like a cliffhanger in a trilogy, because I can't think of others that did it before that, not at least not to the same extent and, in the same manner. But I think with that, just from the pure amount of iconic scenes that I can recall back to and the rewatchability, I would say Empire Strikes Back's got to be mine.
Fair enough. I will say it's kind of to add to your point, kind of there at the end is that lest we forget that the different episodes here are titled as episodes, right?
Right. He did that later. As a kid, I didn't know that, but when they came out, they were simply The Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, formerly in promotional material, Revenge of the Jedi.
It happened at some point. It happened some point in my childhood. I don't remember specifically when, but I just, at some point, my brain just shifted and was like, it's always been like that, right? And then I found out years later, it's like, no, that happened many, many years later.
Yeah, the thing about it is I feel like the title of calling it an episode is kind of ironic because episodic kind of means that they're kind of loosely connected, if at all connected at all. Whereas it being within a series, like an actual a chronological series makes a lot more sense. So calling it an episode is kind of ironic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it makes a really, really good argument to call it the Star Wars saga instead of the Star Wars series,
Yes.
And I feel like that's I think that gives a lot of credence to the community's part in Star Wars as opposed to just this overhead that we have when it comes to Lucasfilms or by extension the BS with the sequel trilogy, which I hate Disney for what they do.
Oh, I'm sure we're gonna get into that in a minute because
Okay, well, speaking of that, before we dive into that, I got one more, and so now that we've talked about the original, let's talk about the prequels.
Okay.
I have one question, or two questions really, and they go hand in hand. Which one is the best and which one is the worst? I think we know the answers to these. It's pretty objective, but again, this is from a preference standpoint.
I guess I'll start with the milquetoast expected opinion, but the best is clearly Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The worst is complicated because most people are probably going to say Attack of the Clones, and the typical given reasons are, well, it's slow, it's boring, but I really like space politics. I'm sorry. I really like space politics and the investigation angle, so I'm going to have to say the first one. I still love Phantom Menace, but I actually liked Attack of the Clones a little more, so I'm going to have to, give that ranking. Not necessarily the popular opinion on my least favorite, but my most favorite, I think everyone has that opinion for the most part.
Oh yeah, very likely. I mean, I'll spoil it for myself. Yes, I absolutely think the best one is Revenge of the Sith. Like, there's no question. It was, of those movies, probably the best made, the most cinematic. It has the most action. There's the most stuff happening, and it neatly ties up the prequels, leading into, the original saga. And in doing that, I personally think it tied Star Wars up with such a perfect little bow that if they had left it right there and never made another one, they would be legendary, continued into the future. The property might be on its way out. Disney's kind of revived it in some aspects. In others, it's really fallen flat and lost a lot of fans. But, I feel like they could have gone other directions with it where they didn't continue into the new one. And Episode 3 is the reason that it could have been just left as it was. As for me personally, I would have to agree with you. I think Episode 2, as much as people have complaints with it and it was politics, the amount of suspense that they built with that one, leading into Episode 3, again, as not a standalone movie, but within the greater Star Wars universe, I think has to be, looked at for what it is, that it was actually a pretty well-made movie. It may not be the most interesting, although, at the end of the movie, you have a spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen this movie from 24 years ago. You got the big battle at the end of it with all the clones marching in on oh my gosh, what was the name of that planet? It was Geonosis. I almost wanted to call it Genoesis, and I was like, that's not it. No. Geonosis. You got the big battle with that. Yoda comes flying in with the carriers. Like, that whole thing was very, very interesting. It reminded me almost of it was almost like a James Bond style with this build up where it's like they're trying to figure out what's happening. There's this mystery occurring, and then it culminates with this giant battle. Anakin loses his arm. That was actually, it was pretty entertaining. Not to say that Phantom Menace didn't also have its good points, but it was definitely a little bit more on the plain side and felt a bit out of character compared to some of the other Star Wars movies. Looking at you, Jar Jar.
Well, there's one opinion we haven't heard yet, so I'm curious where you line up on the chart there with us.
Absolutely, go for it, man.
So, you guys are probably gonna hate me for this, but I'm actually a big big Attack of the Clones fan.
No, we don't hate you. We all like Attack of the Clones.
I was gonna say we were just talking about how it's a good film.
So it's my reasoning though. I feel like Attack of the Clones is probably the greatest way to explain Star Wars to someone who has no idea what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just if you were to kind of take a like bigger picture standpoint, right? I feel like of the prequel trilogy, I feel like so I don't actually like the way that Revenge of the Sith ended. I'm just gonna say that, right?
Really?
Yes, because it feels like the only connection between, you know, other than obviously Anakin becoming Vader, the only connection that we really get is like a 5-second afterthought about how the kids ended up from being born to where they were in, you know, where they were in A New Hope.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he was killing
5-second
younglings.
handoff. Oh, no. By the way, that kid survived anyway. So the
oh no.
Yeah, yes, I said it. That kid survived. So but when you get really into it, it's like we get about as much of an explanation ended up what do you call it, you know, with their caretakers in A New Hope. We got the exact same amount of explanation as to how Han Solo got his gun.
Yeah, I mean,
no joke, it's the exact same thing, and there's nothing that anyone can really convince me otherwise. We get a 5-second. Oh, here you go. That's it. That's all we get. like, and then on top of
Organa comes in. You know, I've always wanted a daughter.
Exactly, right? Exactly, right? And you have to keep in mind, we don't really know their connection, how deep their connection goes until the Clone Wars or the Clone Wars series comes out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff that, because keep in mind, a lot of the stuff that makes Star Wars so good today didn't exist yet.
No.
We didn't have any of this stuff to go off of yet, right? So realistically, I feel like Attack of the Clones is peak Star Wars because we get exactly who Mace Windu is, right? We get exactly who Obi-Wan is. We get peak Anakin, right? But you know, before he turns as, you know, whiny as he does in Revenge of the Sith, which I blame the writing. But like
animals.
no,
exactly.
What's funny is you say that, but at the same token, I've seen a video. It was a literal comparison with Christian Haydenson and Mark Hamill as their respective roles in Star Wars, and literally is like, actually, Christian Haydenson, he came across as whiny, but so was Luke. That was the whole point.
But I'm gonna go to Crossy Station to get some power converters. You can waste time with your friends later.
Right. The best part about it is they're Skywalkers. They're all whiny.
Exactly.
Anyway,
so they stayed true to character. That's the thing. You know?
It's just that here's my biggest thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Attack of the Clones, to this day, is the most written about and reanimated. It is the peak time in all of Star Wars. Absolutely. Because think about it like this, right? Between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, how many series have we gotten after the fact that branched in between those two?
Oh yeah, before Disney grabbed it. Yeah, actually, no. I see what you're talking about now.
No. Even after Disney grabbed it, we still got more in that era.
True.
Right?
True.
Because I mean, like, so many things happened right before Order 66, right? Yeah. But also right after the meeting, whenever with the whole Camino part. Right, where you have Kenobi on Camino, like reviewing what's going on with the clones and all that other stuff. It's right between those 2 points that we get some of the most loved characters in all of Star Wars history. Right, it's when we get Asajj Ventress. It's whenever we get Ahsoka. Right, it's whenever we get what's his face? Kate Fisto. Right, it's when we get all of these really, really beloved characters. Right,
you're right.
It's between those 2 things, and the OT doesn't have that same setup.
No, it doesn't.
If you really think about it, you even include Solo and Rogue One. Those are not offshoots of the OT. They're prequels, which means they take place right after Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah,
that's true. That's very true. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you go for it.
I was going to say, a credit to your point, one of my first video games was a game called Star Wars: The Clone Wars. It was unrelated to the later TV shows that would come out, but It was mostly a vehicle-based game because, of course, it was. But it takes place literally. The beginning is a mission on Geonosis, and by the end, you have to take down Count Dooku's giant doomsday weapon soul harvester thing. It was a wild game. But that said, I loved it and played it repeatedly as a kid. And that took place in between. And of course, my favorite TV series is not the 3D CG animated one, but it's
the 2D one beforehand, right?
Dendy Tartakovsky's
Those are
Star
so
Wars.
good.
Yes. Dude, no, the scene where Mace literally just turns around 360 no scopes Grievous's neck is amazing, dude. It's so good. And straight up the cough. Oh my god. It was so
the entire episode with Mace Windu taking on a clone army with zero
there's
zero dialogue.
There's no dialogue whatsoever. He just comes up, he looks at the kid, he's like, "Sup, kid," and just takes off into the sunset. It's so good.
Oh gosh, his first punches.
Dude, or no
disassembly.
Yeah, no, but the jousting scenes with what do you call it, with
Dirge.
Kenobi? Yes, with Dirge. Oh my god, it was so good with the droid bikers and it's so good. It's so good.
Anyway. Was so good. He was my favorite bounty hunter for a while as a kid because I was
also speaking of edgy, right? Mm-hmm. Republic Commando.
I had that game. It
is one of the best Star Wars games. Like, for me, no joke, for me, Star Wars games, if we're talking not including, what do you call it? Not including, Fallen Order, right?
Yes.
Republic Commando is up there with The Force Unleashed for me. It's just such a good game. It is such a good, raw, gritty game. It exemplifies. It is, in my opinion, it is like the Batman of Star Wars, where it's like you have all these things. It's brooding. There's so much going on. There's actual things at stake. No matter what happens in the game, there's not a happy ending to this.
No, and I think that was my first taste of like M-rated Star Wars, because I got the demo on disc as a kid, and it had the mission where you take down the Trandoshan traders and get
yes, dude.
Remember? Yes.
I mean, to wipe the bug blood off your helmet.
Yes. Oh, the freaking like the little swipe across your screen. Go get that back. Just I loved that game. I'm so sorry. We've been talking over the host, haven't we?
No, this is how it goes. No, but honestly, so that was I take it Clone Wars is your favorite Star Wars movie?
Attack the Clones is just peak Star Wars. It gives me everything I've ever wanted. The way they just decapitate Fett.
That was pretty dope. That was pretty dope.
Mace Windu.
Yep.
It was Mace Windu who did it.
Yep.
And he did it brutally. Again, the arrogant Jedi talking about their high and mighty morals. I didn't even talk about that. The fact that what Windu said mirrored what Palpatine said to Anakin, proving to Anakin in that final moment.
He's too dangerous to be left alive.
There's no difference between you.
Yeah, in my eyes, it's very evil.
Not only that, but there's no difference between you two, and only one of you has been nice to me and is offering to save my wife. I know my choice now.
Correct. And it's so my thing about not liking the Phantom Menace, because the Phantom Menace is actually the one I is my least favorite. There's one good, memorable scene that really makes me want to watch it again.
Yeah.
It's just Darth Maul just doing the thing and just showing off, dude. Literally does his backflips and just goes and he pulls out his lightsaber and we're like, ooh, he's got a red lightsaber. And then there's a second one. There's just a second. You can do that.
So here's the thing about that, right? Like, I thought specifically for Darth Maul's fight with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon was so cool. That was one of the. I mean, I think it is the best scene in the movie. I don't know if I can think of another one. The pod racing was cool, but that was really cool. And
my favorite scene was the pod racing scene as a kid.
I can understand that.
Of course it was. You and your vehicles. You and your modes of transportation, your convenience. Get out of here.
I do.
But that aside, I feel like they did Darth Maul really dirty. Because the thing is, he got that little bit of screen time. You got you don't know who he is. He's just some dude that appears and then, he's a big bad guy. And then he gets cut in half and that's the end of it. So
yeah, the show redeemed him.
The way that they brought him back in the show was definitely very cool.
So many shows, dude. He has his own comics, dude. They're so good. The Maul comics were so good.
But it took years for them to do that. You know, it was like a solid 10 years of just nothing on him. And I remember thinking about it as a kid, like, you know, that he was a really cool character. It's too bad they killed him so fast. And then it turns out that apparently they didn't, and he dies. He survives Order 66, which is well, not that he was a Jedi or anything, but like he survives all the way past that, and then finally dies to Obi-Wan. Like that was poetic justice, and it was like, especially the scene with it. Obi-Wan was like a Ronin, just like walking through, you know, and he's like, "Fight me, you fiend!" and he just kills him right there.
Well, I mean, to be fair though, you also have to think about it like this: he was given as much screen time as he was meant to.
No,
right?
sure.
Like, I love Darth Maul, and yeah, he's a fan favorite character, but you have to realize that what purpose he was actually meant to fulfill. If you don't get into the politics of it, or if you don't really get that deep into what Dooku's doing on the side, Darth Maul doesn't matter, especially considering Darth Maul isn't even really a Darth Lord.
No, of course, you know, he's really just like
apprentice.
a Sith apprentice. Yeah, he's a Sith apprentice.
Well, right, but what I mean by that though is like in a fight between Maul and Asajj. I mean, come on, like. Yeah, I know Asajj isn't really in the movies, obviously, but like if we had to really give it between the two, I'm gonna give it to the Night Sister before I give it to the Dathomir Reject. I'm sorry.
Ooh.
I said it.
Oh wow.
I said it. I don't care. Darth Maul, don't get me wrong. Darth Maul, cool, cool as hell. Brother was objectively, in the right, but that's fine. But no, like Asajj just feels like a more compelling apprentice character for me, especially, going back to the original Clone Wars show, the 2D one.
The introduction.
Dude, the fight between her.
That was so cool.
The fight between her and Anakin, and I showed this to my wife actually. I showed this to my wife. The jungle scene when they're on top of the ancient temple and they're just duking.
And it's just silent for a moment. It begins to rain.
It's when Anakin hits that primal scream that he turns into. When he turns into, he channels that almost Vader-like mentality for the first time, for real. And that alone solidifies it, because that's when he goes from his typical one-handed lightsaber techniques to really gripping it with both arms. Because here's the key thing about the difference between Vader and Anakin, right?
Yeah.
And this is something that a lot of people don't really know unless they get really deep down the Star Wars rabbit hole, is that Vader's lightsaber, people don't like Anakin's fighting technique because it seems too brutal, right? And the thing is, the reason for the scene where he's constantly tinkering with his lightsaber is because Anakin doesn't feel comfortable with any Jedi fighting techniques at all, ever. There's not a single point where he feels comfortable with it, because the lightsaber's too light. It feels like he doesn't have an actual weapon, and it's not until between episode 2 and 3, and you can see this. There's a scene between him and Ahsoka where he's helping Ahsoka finding her technique, where she's got the two differently sized lightsabers, where you realize Anakin's entire thing is that he spends the entire time as a Jedi finding what he believes is the best way to fight, and the best way that he believes to fight is to absolutely conquer your enemy, no exceptions. And it's not until you realize when you go back and you watch that original fight between Asajj and Anakin, that his entire thing is making the lightsaber as heavy as possible and make it big and just really, 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 really heavy, because there's this part, he lets out that primal scream and he goes and he takes both hands and he is absolutely wailing on Asajj. She takes up a defensive stance and he's just absolutely beating her. It's like it's the scene with Hulk and Loki. It's the exact same thing, but instead of just taking him and just kind of like throwing him around, right? He takes his lightsaber, I mean, he's absolutely beating her into the ground so much that the cliff that they're standing on starts cracking, gives way underneath him. And there's the most beautiful part about it is that the lightning strikes and the thunder is happening at the exact same time with every single individual hit. And it just really, really, really drives home how brutal Anakin gets when he loses his way. And that's something that you don't get unless you really, really kind of get into it. But the beauty of it is that in that scene with Darth Maul and Qui-Gon, you get the brutality of the Sith,
Oh
Right.
yeah, because he's absolutely relentless, and of course, to go back to your original point there, I mean, the scene where he is just like repeatedly like beating her onto the cliff, like her face goes from confident to concerned to like terrified before the cliff gives way. Like each flash where it shows her face looks more panicked, if I remember the scene correctly.
No, she gets to a point because on top of that, what makes it even better is because between the tattoo that she has and the rain hitting her, it looks like she's crying in that last hit. And the best part about it is you have to realize she was trained by Dooku.
Yeah.
And the whole point of being trained by Dooku's entire thing is about instilling fear, right? Hence why his name is Dr. Tyrannus. The thing about Dooku is that he trained fear out of her. So for Anakin, a Jedi of all things, to make her more scared of her own master and for her to realize that she's not only outmatched and outclassed. Keep in mind, if you go into the Clone Wars series and also the comic books that really kind of go into her, right? Right before that was about to happen, that's still around the same time that she goes and she recruits Darth Maul's brother to go and try and kill Dooku.
Oh yeah.
So in her mind, she's already prepared to go fight Dooku. So if she's scared, and she's scared of a Jedi, there's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So to really delve into it, like I promise I'll finish in a second. I'll finish in a second.
I asked a question and you're giving something different.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Continue. Sorry.
My question is, what was your least favorite of the prequels?
Phantom Menace.
Okay, that's fair.
It's got one good scene. Everything else is great.
Okay.
It's just Phantom Menace has one good scene.
We're into a whole nother section here. we're going to talk about TV. Oh, you're good. To tell you what, we can come back to the new trilogy because I feel like you guys are already in this flow. I don't want to get too far out of it, but so just as far as the TV series goes, I do have to agree. You know, immediately, probably one of the best, and it's a darn shame it only lasted 3 seasons. I didn't even realize it was this long. I thought it was much shorter than this because
I thought it was 2. Wait,
apparently it was 3 seasons according to Wikipedia. Now, granted, season 1 to 2, each episode was 3 to 5 minutes long.
Oh, that's why I thought, because I remember having a 2-disc set, but that never mind. We are talking about Tartakovsky's Clone Wars, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It came out in 3 volumes. It was a volume set.
Yeah, and it was so gritty. It really felt like it had its own personality. You know, especially, don't get me wrong, I liked the Cartoon Network Clone Wars that then they later killed, and you know, Disney resurrected it kind of, and then did Star Wars Rebels and everything. Like, it was interesting. It was good. And I remember, especially as a kid growing up with that, I got all the toys and stuff. It was the coolest thing to me. But it didn't have the same vibe that you got from the original, which really, I think, helped me to fall in love with Star Wars as a kid, especially because like the original run was so first of all, it was on Cartoon Network, which absolutely I can't imagine any other platform for this to be on. Produced by Lucasfilms, coming out from 2003 to March 2005. Almost said 2025. That's crazy. To 2005, and the fact that it was as gritty and just very, very unique. It sort of started to weave in some of the Star Wars legends and things, and touch on characters that we wouldn't even see yet until much later. The fact that they introduced Grievous here was really, really cool.
Oh, that's what made me fall in love with the Sin.
It's relax. It's a bit, you know. This. What's he gonna do? Crawl up the side of the building? Yes.
And then just starts like he just starts hacking them to bits. Like the fact that he literally like starts. Didn't he like start? No, he didn't rotate. He just did some sort of like crazy like gymnastics thing where he's just like you know, flailing around. He takes, you know, clone troopers, starts throwing them off cliffs and stuff.
Yeah. I feel so bad for Shaak Ti too, because Shaak Ti is not. She's not like a timid person like at all. She's a super confident person. So for her to be scared, that's got to be terrifying, right?
To just dies regularly in the canon.
It's just straight. It's which sucks, right? That's almost as bad. I'm gonna get there.
But yeah, no, I mean it's that. So that Clone Wars is really good. The other Clone Wars is half decent.
They gave us Ahsoka.
Yes, and Oh, she's gonna be at MegaCon, by the way. I forget the voice actor's name. I'll find it and come up with it later. But so that was pretty good. The movie that came from that was really interesting. I remember going to the theater to see that, and it was like a 90-minute movie. So, you know, nothing super fancy, but the fact that it then led into the TV series, I remember going over to my friend's house and watching that every single week after school.
I'll say Asajj to this day is still my all-time favorite, or at least one of my favorite characters in Star Wars. She's gonna go down as probably the one reason as to why I kept giving Star Wars a chance.
Wow.
Because because her and Anakin, they have the exact reversed story.
They do.
Yeah.
She wants to be a Sith so badly. She desperately wants to be a Sith, and Anakin feels like he should be a Jedi, and yet both of them kind of realize they're not cut for that cloth necessarily.
Yeah, and then the fact that Asajj becomes not only a good guy at the end, but she also gets to fall in love. They end up, like, granted, that ended in tragedy, right? But, like, there's so much to her that we ended up getting that I wish we would have gotten with some other characters. Also, another thing about the 2D Clone Wars show is also it gave us Shaggy.
Oh yes, Shaggy, which originally he didn't even necessarily have a name, but they thought it'd be funny to be like, yeah, I mean, he looks like Shaggy. We'll just give him Shaggy as a name.
Which character are you talking about?
Wikipedia.
There's a character. You might want to pull this up, Justin. Right? It's a character named Shaggy. It's Shaggy from Scooby Doo.
Oh my gosh, I'm seeing
it.
That's so funny.
It's so good. It's so good.
So I don't personally remember this character, but I mean,
it was like 4 seconds in an episode one time. Don't worry about it.
I was gonna say he talked about being worried about General Grievous, and then he died.
Oh, that's crazy.
I think Grievous just death from above him, just pummeled him into the ground. Highlander burial straight into the earth.
One of my favorite things about General Grievous is that a lot of people don't realize that he's meant to be kind of like a dragon.
Go on.
I mean, think about it like this, right? His species is constantly looking to improve itself, right? But granted, you know, that's a whole nother rabbit hole, right? But the dude's entire thing is about collecting treasures, and the treasure of his choice is lightsabers. Those are his trophies, right? But he doesn't collect them because of them being trophies. He collects them because he's genuinely that's just his thing. That's his hoard that he just so happens to keep with him, right? Wow. And something I love about it, right, is that here's how you know that it's not him keeping them as trophies. He actively uses them, and also the thing about it is he didn't kill all of them. It's implied that he did, but he didn't. That's just a collection. He doesn't care how he comes upon them as long as he does.
Interesting. I'm gonna look at that again, because of course Lucas would put a dragon style character in there.
Think about his appendages in his arms, right? Like if you think about it, he doesn't have hands. He has claws and talons.
That's a good point.
Oh shoot. Yeah. No, you got me there.
Yep.
Yeah, he's more animalistic than he is humanoid.
I mean, he'd spend
especially when he's hunting everyone.
Dude, the amount of crawling that this dude does is kind of scary, because he doesn't even crawl, he skitters, and it's terrifying.
Oh yeah.
You don't hear footsteps. All you hear is the little metal on a metal, just the and it's terrifying, dude.
I saw a short one. I think it was a YouTube short recently, and it was literally like a conversation between Dooku and Grievous, and he's like, well, I can't use the Force, and Dooku's like, you have to think better than that, and he's like, I can crawl. He's like, what does that mean? He's like, watch me, and he like crawls up, and he's like, and now I land on him. He's like, that's very effective.
One of my favorite things is someone put General Grievous's name into Google Translate, and they hit the audio thing. So instead of it being General Grievous, it was General Grievous. It just plays like the French national anthem. It's so funny, dude.
Oh, he's got 4 baguettes.
Yes, he teaches his lightsaber to a baguette and gives him a beret, and it's so funny.
The whole video of Star Wars, though, it's like they dubbed it with the French voice to text, and it's Zwish.
So funny, dude.
No.
Oh man. Ashley Eckstein, by the way, or Eckstein. She's Ahsoka. She's gonna be at MegaCon, so that'll be pretty cool.
You're telling me there's a female character that was not voiced by Tara Strong? You're kidding.
Right? On Cartoon Network.
Wild to me.
That's incredible.
Oh man, but yeah, no, honestly, this was a phenomenal series. Question: has anybody here seen? Well, I think Alex, you've probably seen, but have you guys seen the new Disney produced TV series such as The Mandalorian? What was it? Was Boba Fett a movie or was that a TV series?
The Book of Boba Fett.
The Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
The short answer is yes for a while, and I have a very specific point at which I stopped, but I think I should save that for when you ask about Disney, because that will fall into a diatribe. The short answer is some of it. The longer answer will come later as ominous foreshadowing, unless we intend to jump into Disney now.
My quick question is this: was it before or after the Bill Burr episode?
Before or after the Bill Burr? Oh, no, I have seen the Bill Burr episode. That was, I actually rather liked that. No, specifically the point I stopped watching was the Kenobi show. That was it. That was my straw breaking the camel's back.
Okay, so you made it further than I did.
That was my straw. I had a desperate, vain hope that things would improve simply because Mando season 1 and 2 seemed to be good, and I actually didn't have as many problems with Book of Boba Fett as many did until I learned about the behind the scenes shenanigans, which made me actually quite angry.
What are those? I haven't heard about that.
Not this episode. Yeah, just make it Reader's Digest version.
The Reader's Digest version was Mandalorian was basically promised by Kathleen Kennedy, okay, we won't interfere with your show. It's fine. And a lot of people call Book of Boba Fett Mandalorian Season 2.5 because Kennedy's loophole was, oh, but this isn't the Mandalorian. And so, because they wanted to get rid of Grogu, they wanted to give him a new mode of conveyance, they wanted to start lumping the show into more of a Mandalorian thing, she used the opportunity to have a different director be like, hey, do you mind if we put some Mandalorian elements in your show? Huh? Oh, sure. Fine. Okay. To make sure that Grogu was back, give him a completely new ship, make sure that things were back to the status quo, and get rid of his Darksaber. Why? Because, oh, well, I'm not touching your stuff. In short, I actually have nothing against the director of Book of Boba Fett. I have almost everything against Kennedy and her staff for using Book of Boba Fett as a vessel to basically force Mandalorian to go the direction they wanted, all while still technically fulfilling their contract of, oh, but we're not touching it.
Is she out at this point? I thought I heard something about that she's gone.
I hope you're right. But no, because I had so much goodwill. In short, to answer your question before I fall into the diatribe again, to answer your question, I gave it enough goodwill to where I went all the way through Book of Boba Fett and the first 2 seasons of Mando. I got to Obi-Wan because I was like, okay, new director. Boba Fett wasn't that bad. Again, at the time, didn't know the background stuff. Was like, okay, so I'm going to give this a chance. And without getting into a massive rant, the short answer is that killed it for me. That they had the best possible actors, they had the highest possible budget, and they managed to spit on the grave of that which they were puppeting around in front of the audience so hard that I simply could not find it within myself to be like, basically I could not find it within myself to keep purposely watching the new content when it was very clear that they did not respect the property. I have nothing against the actors in that show, and I need to specify that because the actor for Reva got a lot of hate. She didn't do anything wrong. I personally think that, given the sets of circumstances, I mean, I would be excited to take up a role in something as big as Star Wars too, so she's fine. It's the directors, and especially the studio, that I lay the blame squarely on.
Yeah, so according to what I'm seeing here, unfortunately, I do say unfortunately because Star Wars is a property I do still love, even if they're really butchering it. Unfortunately, Kathleen Kennedy is still running Lucasfilms. I guess she had her contract renewed again in 2021 for 4 years through 2024. So I don't know if she's stepping down this year or what the case is. Basically, long story short, there's the possibility for a few different things to happen. I really hope Disney takes a good long look at it and recognizes that yes, while some of these shows may be decently popular and have drawn moderate success, it's not what the fan base is looking for, and she's not the person who needs to be doing this.
No, I have a brief rant on this on my channel that I made like 2 years ago, so it's probably a little outdated. But in short, studios, the entire point of buying a property as a mega corporation is that it comes with a built-in audience and guaranteed viewership. So it seems so illogical to me that even a cold calculating corporation would look at that and go, so we're going to consciously make an effort to make something that isn't what the fans want.
Right.
Like, I'm not saying capitulate to every single fan demand. What I'm saying is you've gone out of your way to buy a named property so that you have fans and numbers. It is a guaranteed return on investment. Where is the harm in giving the fans what they ask for? Case in point, the Sonic movies, it was going to flop, and then they went, you know what? The fans said they didn't like this. We're going to change a couple things.
Yep.
I'm not even the biggest Sonic fan.
No.
I'm not even a huge Sonic fan. But just because a studio backed down once and said, you know what? You all criticize the design. We're going to put it back into the shop here. We're going to release it like 6 months later with a redesigned character. I went to see it on principle.
Ooh.
Just because I was like, you know what? I want to support that. And it turned out to be pretty good. And every movie since, they have kept listening to their fan base, and who would have guessed it turned out well? Mandalorian, they tended to listen to their fan base a lot more than the movies did, and it outperformed for a while.
Right.
Then the studio got involved, it became less of a problem. On the Star Trek side of things, Lower Decks, the first episode, had the most studio interference, and it was frankly the worst of the bunch, and the rest of it was made by people who clearly care about the series. Turns out it was good. There is a simple formula to this that any brain-dead CEO could possibly look at. Anyone with just a basic business sense could look at and go, if I give the existing audience what they want and expand a little bit so that new audiences can get interested, then I will make money. And it baffles me that at almost every turn, corporations like Disney especially seem to go out of their way to, if not ignore the fan base, then explicitly go against what the fan base wants.
Yeah, and
it's not some surrender to give the people you literally bought the property for what they're asking for.
100%.
I'm gonna say that, not to get on the political side of things, but it's not about the money.
Yeah,
it's not about the money. It's about the control and the means in which they can deliver certain things to certain audiences. It's purely about market control. It's not about the money. They don't care.
Yeah, and you know, that's exactly the thing, right? Like, and I mentioned this earlier, kind of on a just touching briefly on it. It frustrates me when, because let's put it this way, most corporations, and I do say most because especially if you look at what's happened the last few years, where corporations have basically turned heel and changed what they were doing at the last possible second. They're looking to pander, but pander to make the most money. They felt, especially Disney, I think, felt like pandering to certain audiences would somehow restore their reputation or give them some kind of social boost or something to get more of their stuff out there. And it's been failing. What's really confusing to me is the fact that they kept doing it despite it not working. And, like, you'd think that a big corporation like Disney would look at it after 4, 5, 6, 10 years of the same stuff and say, we're losing a lot of money on these properties that we seem to be really, really, shoving our big greedy hands into and manipulating and changing it to something that we want to see, but not the fans want to see. Maybe we're doing something wrong. And especially considering, I recognize Disney has a lot of money, but they seem to claim that they don't have as much money as they should. And they do these layoffs, they keep canceling stuff, they're dumping properties. Like, that's not something that a successful company does unless you're restructuring to try to fix, what you were doing. But then they keep doing the same stuff anyway. So it's like, I feel like they're not learning their lesson here. Is the equivalent of putting your hand on a hot stove, burning yourself and saying, wow, that was weird, and doing it again. Like, no, learn your lesson. What are you doing?
I agree. They seem, it's almost as if they don't have a market data department at all. It is, again, I'm not even saying like look, okay, let's say that you do have an agenda, right? Like let's I'll go with your political side thing. You can have almost anything successfully work with a political message. I'm a huge fan of Star Trek, which if we assume that there's an attempt to push an agenda or a perspective or something, Star Trek often tackled a lot of political views and stuff, usually leaning more towards the liberal side of things, but it tended to do it in a way that was tactful, interesting, and made the audience think. There was a lot of firsts on not only the original Star Trek, but especially The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, where they would show a perspective, but most importantly, they did it with good writing. A great example of this is just as a lot of Disney's films are flopping, the Barbie movie made bank, and a lot of people, and that was explicitly a heavy-handed political film, and yet, or more specifically, a criticism of society from a very specific political perspective, and yet it was very entertaining and very fun.
I want to make just a quick side note on the whole Barbie movie.
Yeah.
The best part about the Barbie movie is that it didn't make, so like it did what I really, really, really like, which is it made a lot, it took a lot of those criticisms, but made some of the most extreme claims about those in every direction. Like it wasn't like they were trying to push an agenda. It was they were trying to just throw a whole bunch of stuff in a whole bunch of different directions, not to see if it would stick, but because you can take from that movie what you want from it, and there's a reason as to why Ken was the best character.
And yes, and that actually leads to my point. I'll go even a step further. I think that the director very much had a particular viewpoint that they favored, and yet they showed the other side of the coin. This is what Star Trek would often do. Case in point, new Star Trek, I know this is talking about Star Wars, but I'll just give this brief example and then we'll keep going. New Star Trek had a character who would regularly just tell her male counterparts just how incompetent they were. Meanwhile, old Star Trek would have fantastic moments where you see the merits of various diverse crew members. Actually, hold on. Editor's note, can you cut that section out? I have a better way to phrase this. I'm so sorry.
I'll go for it.
Okay, resuming in 3, 2, 1. New Star Trek 10. One more time. 3, 2, 1. Classic Star Trek would have a lot of amazing scenes where there were definitely characters who we were meant to see as kind of an antagonist. And in a lot of cases, say characters like Worf held fairly conservative views that were, well, very conservative views that were antithetical to certain other crew members' beliefs, such as when he wants his friends to help him unalive because of a cultural problem, or when he has certain religious compunctions about relations on the ship, etc. But they never show him as a villain. They show him as someone who's going through this emotional set of circumstances, and while he does often learn in episodes, there's also a lot of episodes where other characters come to understand his perspective better and things like that. And it's not unique to him. Meanwhile, in shows like, say, Star Trek Discovery, you'll just have the main character blatantly tell someone, oh, no, you're wrong. You're a bad person for thinking that. This way is the right way. No nuance, no nothing. And that's where it comes down to it, whether it be Barbie, Star Wars, Star Trek. You can have pretty much any perspective portrayed on screen, but you got to write it well. And I feel like, to finally tie it all back to Star Wars, you're right, they're trying to definitely pander, but they're doing it with such laziness and lack of writing, and they have the money to hire people who can write well. They're doing it with such a lazy attitude to where it's just not working. They're slapping a sticker on something and saying, look at this, isn't it advanced? Buy our movie, when they're not even trying.
But the thing is, I feel like, okay, in their eyes, I think they are trying. You have to remember that this is about hiring practices, right? It's not a matter of just, oh, Star Wars is lazy. It's you have to think about it from the perspective, from the worldview of Hollywood alone. Right, and just kind of, those kinds of spaces, they hire from within, and they will only hire people who agree with their outlook and with their view and with their mission. So it's not a matter of just, oh, they're lazy. It is almost, at least in my opinion, malicious, because they're going to go out of their way to only hire people who agree with their worldview. And because of that, they are incapable of going down that path of recovery, right? Because they're exclusively hiring in the people who caused the problem in the first place.
Yeah,
so ironically,
there's definitely a level of insularism in Disney and a lot of these big corporations, like you mentioned, where it's basically like, if you're part of our club, then you can make stuff. If you're not part of our club, then you have no business being here. And it's like, okay, unfortunately, you end up with these echo chambers where it's the same type of stuff, and they don't listen to the outside. They kind of turn it off again, because if they had been listening to the fan base and hearing what we've been saying, and people have been shouting this for a long time, saying, no, what are you doing? This is our, this is our series. This is our property that we really like, that we grew up around, or that we really connect with. And then they come back and say, no, this is our property that we can do what we want with. And it's like, but you don't get it. That's like, yes, technically you do own it, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do all the stuff you want with it and see massive success and demand that we go, watch this and give you all the success that you think you deserve.
Right.
I mean, think about what happened with Gina Carano with the Mando, right? She expressed an opinion, right? Regardless of whether or not you agree with the opinion or not. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point is that she had an opinion. She posted something on Twitter that had to do, I believe it was either with COVID, or it was about the election, something. But she posted something on Twitter. Disney didn't like that very much, and what ended up happening is that they completely gave her the boot and they called her a Nazi. And it's like, yeah, no. Disney, especially when it comes to Star Wars specifically, right, plays a really, really dirty game when it comes to politics. And again, I'm not trying to get too deep into the weeds with politics here, but it really, really plagued this new generation of Disney, especially when it comes to the Star Wars IP, right, to the point where it bled into everything that they had, right? So like when it comes to when it comes to their practices and the way that they go about things internally, it's a matter of everything is downstream from the creators, and the creators are the ones that Disney hires. And Disney hired people who had a specific agenda and who have a specific worldview that affects each and every single individual thing that they do. Right? Every single individual thing that they do, they have to inject it into something, or else it's seen as incorrect. So it just naturally follows that everything that we have these days sucks, because everything now is politicized. And even when and like you said, you can politicize something if you want to, or you can put an agenda or a perspective out there if you want to, so long as it's well written. The problem is they don't write things well because nuance doesn't matter to them.
No, and I think beyond that as well, it's not even just about, adding politics into something or not adding politics. I think part of it is, it's the concept of, that's how Star Trek was built. It was built on this idea of being able to put in certain messages and stuff. Star Wars was not. It was never built with that intention. It was, like you said, it's a space opera. It's just a matter of the writing was, portrayed in a certain way that allowed for certain types of themes to be delivered. It was not meant to be a political pandering thing, and the people who found themselves gravitating towards Star Wars versus Star Trek, or, sometimes there's that overlap, as in, especially with, I was about to say with Iron, there's that overlap, but that's not a guarantee. And trying to emulate something else in a well-established property, just saying, oh, I want to do this thing, it's not always going to work. And if it doesn't work, they need to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, maybe this doesn't work here. Make something else. If you really want to get that political message out, you can make something else. I can't guarantee you that thing's going to do well, but you shouldn't murder an existing property just because you want to push a certain message or deliver some kind of theme or something to an audience that may or may not be receptive to it.
Oh yeah, and while their counter argument typically is like, yes, well, this has a built-in fan base, so we won't get numbers or a return on something that's original. Well, therein lies your problem, though. The only reason you're getting those numbers guaranteed, the only reason you're getting that viewership guaranteed, is because it has an existing fan base. If you sour that pool, then you are using and then dumping a property. You are
Exactly.
buying something, getting a couple of squeezes out of it until the fan base no longer likes your quickly pumped out slop, and then going away. And by slop, I'm not even referring to anything political or anything. I mean, again, you can write just about anything well, but they don't even seem to put the effort into that.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching this episode of Tavern Talks 2.0, or should I say Cantina Talks. We had a lot of fun making this episode, and once again, we ran way over time. So make sure to check in next Friday to hear part 2, where we'll dive into the new trilogy, video games, and other Star Wars related media. A huge thanks once again to Iron and Alex for joining me. Make sure you check out Iron's channel linked in the description, and subscribe to us here on Velvet Games if you aren't already subbed. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, stay awesome.